Renowned Queen Cleopatra with our dear guest, Mr. Samir Abbass, Egyptologist. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Abbass. A pleasure to have you with us. I don't want to take from your time because I enjoy, and I think our dear viewers also enjoy listening to you. So, the mysteries of our great ancient queen, Cleopatra.
Yes, so the first question, if she's an Egyptian or not. That's the first question. That's the first mystery is about her. So the interesting thing that even with her fame as one of the most famous queens in the ancient world, there is many question marks about her history. If she was an Egyptian or no, if she was beautiful or no. So if she was a woman in love with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, or she was in love and power and she was ready to do anything to stay in power. So if she committed suicide or she has been assassinated or has been forced to kill herself
all these things are not known till now,
and even her tomb even her tomb is not discovered yet, and we are talking about one of the most influencing characters in history.
So all of these things are known, but there is no confirmation, there's no 100% credible information that would support this or that theory.
There is no enough evidence to say for sure, because
to answer any of these questions.
I will give you an example.
For sure.
So to know if she's an Egyptian or no, we need to find her mummy, her body, and by studying her body, we will know if she's really had a pure bloodline from the ancient Greek Ptolemy kings, or she had an Egyptian blood influence. So let's take it step by step.
Yes. Maybe if we trace her family, we can know whether she's...
Let's start with that. Her family actually, her grandfather is Ptolemy I. Ptolemy I is Greek, Macedonian general. He was fighting with Alexander. When Alexander took over Egypt, and shortly after his death, the big empire divided between his army leader, Ptolemy took Egypt as his portion, and he started a dynasty starting from Ptolemy I till Cleopatra the Seventh. She is the number 7, by the way, Cleopatra the Seventh. So that was happening over 300 years, from Ptolemy the First till Cleopatra the Seventh, and she was born in 69 BC. So this family was ruling Egypt since the 4th century BC, and they have quite an interesting custom. They have an intermarriage, incest, marrying like within brothers and sisters. And to be more specific, they copied the ancient Egyptian custom, the ancient Egyptian royal customs, because this custom or this tradition was exist in the ancient Egyptian court as well. And from their perspective, that is the best way to keep the royal blood intact. And the result of that is a decline gradually because of the genetics deformations and disease. And that's explained why we have many dynasties in ancient Egypt, like I'm talking about the pharaohs, and gradually it starts with a very powerful king, leader, and gradually it ends with dumb and dumbers at the end. So and that's enough reason to move to another dynasty, another person, strong leader, he took over and he started a new family. So, and that's exactly what was happening in Ptolemy, in the Ptolemite dynasty. So they were very strong in the beginning, Ptolemy the First, the Second, the Third, until the Fifth. The Fifth is decline starts, until literally they became dumb and dumbers at the end. Then Cleopatra came, which is completely a big exception. So myself, I think that there is an Egyptian blood influence in this family, which is the result with Cleopatra. And I have a reason for that. So the first reason is even Cleopatra mummy or body not being discovered yet, but her sister Arsinoe body has been discovered, has been found or buried in Ephesus, and has been recently studied. And they found that there is a very strong African influence in her body. Egypt was African, and when they say African influence, they relate to Egyptian influence.
Right.
Another reason as well. So following this theory, that was typical, that at the end of the dynasty weakness. So when we have a new blood introduced, like not an inner marriage, like a marriage from outside of the family, normally that brings a different, a strong character. And that's how we can explain that how Cleopatra came with very strong character, with a very strong personality, and she was able to restore the power of Egypt in that time and the power of this dynasty.
We understand, Mr. Abbass, that she was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language.
That's another reason as well. She was able to master 7 languages. Among them, is the ancient Egyptian language. She was the first king or the first queen in Ptolemite dynasty to speak the ancient Egyptian language. She was adapting the ancient Egyptian tradition. She introduced herself as the goddess Isis. You know, in official like parties, she will dress like Isis, the ancient Egyptian goddess. That's another reason why I'm thinking that she had an Egyptian blood influence.
So, sir, can you elaborate more on her personal life?
That's another important topic as well, because she was introduced. First of all, you know, let's know how we know what we know. So,
Yes.
Cleopatra movie is one of the very important source of knowing about Cleopatra.
Yes.
Cleopatra movie, when it came out in 1963, you know, so that was one of the coins of Cleopatra, by the way, has been found in Alexandria. And
So this reveals how she looks like.
and which is not beautiful as we think,
Oh,
right?
yes.
You know, with a big forehead and with a big nose, which is completely destroyed the image
Yes.
of Elizabeth Taylor in our view.
The movie,
And
yes.
that's another mystery about Cleopatra. And until now, we don't know really how she looks like. So talking about this movie, which is the main source of actually how people know, that came out in 1963. It was costed at that time $44 million.
Oh, that's a huge.
Which is an equivalent of $350 million today. And that was the biggest production in movies. And that is the main influence actually of the history of this lady, which is they took the history. We cannot depend on movies as a source of information in this case. Another important source is more than 50 writers from Roman backgrounds. So they start writing ancient Rome. Plutarch is the most famous of them, and he wrote down her biography about Cleopatra and Mark Antony 100 years, a century after her death. So 50 ancient writers from the Roman perspective, they wrote the history about Cleopatra. Do you think that we should trust in the writing? So the problem is Cleopatra being considered as an enemy to the Roman Empire. Cleopatra almost destroyed the first democratic system in the history of mankind. Cleopatra, she was the main reason behind the assassination of Julius Caesar, not directly, indirectly by influencing him to have more power. Cleopatra, she is the main reason why Mark Antony committed suicide and going in conflicts against his own people, the Roman Empire. And because of that, and the Romans, they viewed Cleopatra as a lady, Egyptian lady, she tried to take their power away. And that's why 50 writers has been paid or commissions with a bias to destroy her fame. So she was introduced as a lady. She will do everything possible, using her body, seducing powerful man, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, in order to stay in power. So maybe they don't want to acknowledge, or they don't want to introduce the fact that a woman, very well educated, very smart, using her strategic planning, she can rule the world, and that was Cleopatra. That's why she was introduced in a completely different way. So that's another photograph from Khomshoef tomb, a very well known in Alexandria, and that's possibly the lost tomb of Cleopatra, which is, I will talk about that at the end of our talk today. So another perspective to look at why she was introduced in that like normal looking or sometimes not beautiful at all in the coins and the art. It could be a way of showing her as with male figures, like Hatshepsut did before. Hatshepsut, when she ruled Egypt with a beard. So the image of ancient Egyptian culture, and even during the Greeks, like the Ptolemies, is the man is the one who is in power. So to have the image of a beautiful lady on the coins, on the statues as a king, it is not accepted by the public, and that's why Hatshepsut, a long time before that, she introduced herself as a man. In the public art. Maybe Cleopatra did the same thing, covering her beauty in public art in order to show that she can rule as a man. As a ruler, she was a very successful ruler. So that's another mystery about Cleopatra, which is not being solved until today.
What about her role in controlling the economy? Was it command economy at the time, and she controlled prices and was successful in leading the economy, or were there financial problems that led to a decay?
So the financial problem, that was a result of the Roman influence in Egypt. So Egypt was extremely wealthy, and the Roman interest in Egypt was mainly to pay the debt of the Roman leaders. Julius Caesar fall in love with Cleopatra. He was 50 years old by the time when she was 20 years old. when she became in power. So 3 years, 30 years difference between them. So that was more like a strategic relationship. She needs his muscle to protect her empire, and he needs her wealth and the wealth of Egypt to pay the debt of the Roman Empire. So, but without the interference of the Romans, so Mark Antony was almost a similar story as well. So without that, Egypt is very wealthy, and Cleopatra, she is very, very successful in running the country. She was even had a very good role in protecting the people, the commoner, from a famine. When the Nile River, even that was in the first year of her rule, when the Nile River did not flood enough to irrigate the lands, she supported the people by giving them food to survive. So another dark side of Cleopatra, that she married two of her brothers.
She married two of
her brothers,
yes.
Ptolemy the 13 and 14, and that was based on the father wish, by the way. That was a custom in that time. And she was accused of killing at least one of them, and she was accused of killing one of her sisters as well, and she did all that to stay in power.
So you believe, Mr. Abbass, that her love for power was bigger than anything else, bigger
Yes.
than her love for Egypt or for her husbands or for her family or for her...
I will put that in a parenthesis a little bit, like for her love for power, for her love for Egypt, which is they cannot be separated from each other, and then anything else comes after that.
So, sir, what about her death, and what happened afterwards?
So her death, first of all, so the political situation which is a result to her death, she died at the age of 39. She was 39 when she died, which is, if she lived longer, she might change the history completely. Because one of the reasons of falling or being in relationship with Julius Caesar and almost like a wife and to carry his baby is because of this son, which is called Ptolemy the 15 or Caesarion. She was planning to be the emperor not only of Egypt, the emperor of Rome as well, and he will control most of the ancient world in that time. So that was her plan, and the Roman leaders, they read this plan very well, and that's why they considered her as very dangerous. She attracted Julius Caesar to her side to support her, and he spent most of his time with her. And after his assassination in Rome, she attracted the second most powerful leader in the Roman Empire, which is Mark Antony. It is not about love here, because the two men, they are the most powerful army leaders in their time. And that was because of her influence on him, and because he walked away completely from his Roman backgrounds. He went in conflicts with his allies in Rome, Octavian, which is his brother-in-law, by the way, marrying from Cleopatra and having 3 kids with Cleopatra. And that's bring a direct conflict between Mark Antony and Octavian. Both they are Romans. So Cleopatra supported Mark Antony, and mainly to take over all Rome and declares herself together with her husband Mark Antony as the Queen of Rome. So when Mark Antony lost the battle, or both of them to be more specific, lost the battle, so and he'd seen that he lost all of his power, he decided to commit suicide by falling in his own sword. Not only because of, also there is a rumor has been made by Cleopatra that she was killed in the battle, and she made this rumor in purpose because he was about to reach settlements with Octavian, a peace settlements, and she will be out of these settlements, and that's why the only way to get him back to Alexandria, not to go to Rome, is to announce that she was killed in a battle, and that was enough to drag him to her. So she committed suicide, or she died.
Is there any documentation on that theory? The theory you mentioned, very
and so there is a fact,
interesting theory.
There is a fact that there is
the rumor. I
yes,
the rumor
there is a 6 months between the death of Mark Antony and the death of Cleopatra, and that cannot be related to each other unless that they wanted to take her as a prisoner of war. So her tomb, which could be the lost tomb of Mark Antony and Cleopatra in Komushaf, Alexandria, or it could be in Tab Osiris, which is still a mystery which is not being discovered. So from my point of view, when I look at this subject, Cleopatra versus Alexander versus Ramesses II, which is a very famous leaders, I look at them as a very good way of for people to test their own, to figure their own personality. Because if you are, you know, you can tell if you are yourself, if you have morals compared to greed, if you have love to the mankind, or you have a love and power, and you are ready to take everything or to do anything to be in power, or even if that will cost you and the people around you much. So by asking yourself, after knowing the history, the real history of these characters, Cleopatra, Alexander, Ramesses, do you still like them? Do you still value them? Do you still respect them as a role model? Your answer tells you who you are after revealing the hidden history of these characters and putting them in the right perspective. Because normally history is what we know, is what is meant for us to know. But the good news now, we have science, we have research, we have excavations, and we can find references and we can test things in ourselves in order to know another perspective about history.
So finally, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Samir Abbass, Egyptologist. Thank you for being with us today.